of the investment in Iraq. So as Dasha mentioned, so I'm Hamid Farman. I'm the investment manager at Growfin. Growfin is an investment management firm. We mainly invest in SMEs. We have a portfolio of more than 13, or actually by now it's like $15 million across Iraq. So we started in Basra in southern Iraq, where we invested in some oil companies back then, back in 2013. And then we have an office here in Erbil as well, with a team of other investment managers, where we manage different funds on behalf of international investors. These investors come from, they are international, well-known investors. They invest in the SME businesses, and our day-to-day job is to structure these transactions and make and source opportunities. Any SME, like any SME or businesses that need working capital, whether it's that or some other capital to expand their businesses, or to have a they want some kind of lending. Growfin is the right organization for that. So I've been with them for about 5 years, and happy to share. So today's session would not be about that. It would be more about the landscape and in Iraq in general. So we will dive into these. I will just share my screen actually, so we can go from there. Anybody? I think you guys now see my screen as well. So let me just put it on the full screen mode. Okay, so this webinar actually, so we will focus, as I mentioned, on the investment landscape in Iraq, and I think it's quite broad, and we will not cover everything here in this webinar. What we will do is to focus on the things that are, quite should be well known to the community, and that's kind of like an introduction for this session. So, as you know, Iraq's economy basically depends on SME projects. SMEs are the backbone of any economy, but in Iraq as well, it's SME projects and are the backbone of the economy. Almost 90% of the SME, they provide the jobs along with the government jobs actually for the local community. So SME projects are really the backbone, and Iraq depends on them as a lot, and development of SME finance and SME, which is quite tantamount. It's something that needs to be looked at it needs to be looked at in a way so that it can leverage the SMEs and make them viable businesses on the long term, because for a lot of them actually do fail when obstacles come in their way. So and that's kind of one thing that we have in Iraq, which is the SME market. If we go to so different, we have sectors. So investment in Iraq is actually, we have a lot of opportunities, but of course obstacles are also, and challenges are always on the way. And one of the things that we have in Iraq is something that I think well known to a lot of international investors, is that we have political insecurity, we have instability, we have security concerns. All these things actually still kind of hinder the process of investment in Iraq. It's something that in more stable regions, you can see that investments are quite booming across different sectors, and that's mainly because the investors see a stability in that region, and they look into the long term of the investments, and that's what investments all about, looking into long term of viable enterprises. So in Iraq, expansion of businesses is something demands considerable resources, dedicated teams, sufficient capital, and making and both of them come at a cost. So all of these are quite challenges today in the investment in the investment sphere or the landscape in Iraq. So determining the value of businesses is kind of like a delicate act, I would say, between both the founders and investors. Founders want good investors, and investors want good founders, and kind of like they have to align their different visions together, so that both the business and investor can come to terms of what they really want to bring about. So in Iraq, we have so the sectors that are that are make the largest the largest sectors in Iraq are basically oil and gas. We know that 90% of the Iraq's economy come from oil. So, and still it's an oil-based country. We have like government employees and most of Iraq's systems and institutions depend on the government, and the government depends on the oil that it sells to cover all that. So, and we will get through the oil and investment in oil and gas, and this sector is quite it's remarkable. It's big. It's something that the government obviously have the hand on. Because that's the most important sector for them and for the economy. And so that sector indeed in particular makes the bulk of Iraq's economy. And the way and there are a lot of plans to make the sector much more reformed so that it can deliver the results that it can. And we will get through that as well. Infrastructure comes next. That's a sector actually is like because of Iraq's, the land and the population, it's a big country. So infrastructure projects all ultimately, are the next big sector in Iraq. And investment in the infrastructure is quite, important, and it will have, returns that are especially for large investors, that are quite good. Tourism here in Kurdistan, the region of Iraq, you have booming tourism sector, which is quite underdeveloped. If you look into any of the areas that are tourist places, it's still run by some startups or some companies that are travel agencies, but the tourism sector still is underdeveloped. We don't have a tourist sector that attracts investors to invest in, and so that's something a sector that could be looked at because there is a lot of opportunities in that sector. Real estate, obviously, we have a lot of investment in real estate, and we see a lot of this is happening. This sector is actually quite good in both in the populated cities in Erbil, Suli, and Baghdad. So these are the sectors that are telecommunication sectors these are the stable ones. I think these sectors will stay because of course telecommunication companies have some telecommunication companies have actually penetrated the markets, and now they are quite on a good standing, I would say, and these are always they can get the investment and everything, but they have quite became the known sectors in the region, and they are the ones that are making actually investments in other companies as well. Healthcare, that sector that that sector is also quite important. It's remarkable that we have a lot of healthcare facilities, and it will always be demanding sector in Iraq. Renewable energy, that's quite underdeveloped as well. This sector is still in its early stages. We don't have too much investment in renewable energy. There's this idea that how we get our electricity, how we get our energy sources. Still, we are using the old methods of generating electricity, and this sector is also quite have a lot of attraction from specific investors that are into these kind of businesses, and we have seen some kind of companies that are quite advanced, trying to advance trying to advance and make it make businesses around this sector, and there has been some investments to that effect. But again, it's underdeveloped at the moment. I don't think we have in Iraq a quite strong renewable energy sector that is completely well developed, and it's remarkable that how much that will make a change in Iraq actually, especially and the impact that it will deliver environmental wise and actually for the benefit of the population. So that's something I think we have to look at as well. So there are challenges. I mentioned some of the challenges, foreign ownership laws, and we will talk about that. And because it's different in Iraq and it's different in southern Iraq, in the government of Iraq, and then in the Kurdistan region. So in the government of Iraq, so the ownership actually for any company has to be 51% by an Iraqi. So a company or a business that is registered, let's say in Baghdad, has to be owned by an Iraqi, but the shares has to be 51%, and then or no less than that amount, and that kind of hinders the foreign investment for these businesses. Why? Because the 51% share is actually creates the hindrance on the term of the investment, so that the owners of these companies will have the decision making. Their decision making cannot be stripped away just because they have the majority of the shares of any company. And so a lot of foreign investors, when they invest in some companies or businesses, or they always want to also have control over that, because they want to see how their vision of returns will come into effect. And so it's important for everybody to know that this is currently the law as we know it. It's in Iraq, and the 51% ownership is still in effect in Baghdad by the Baghdad government. So we have the security challenges, as I mentioned, threat of these are known groups, extremist groups that are still in effect in Baghdad, and there's still some kind of fear around some cities and how that will be affected. So a lot of investment leaders actually in this space see Iraq as a country that is not very well ready for investment, and this kind of creates the impediment in the country, and it will have a ripple effect on others, other places as well, and we'll get into that. So it's like the main part, because these extremist resurgent groups, I don't think it will be like in all parts of of the country, and they have their own specific goals that are not necessarily to hinder investments, but it's just the effect that it will have will not be ignored. So so these are the challenges sometimes, and we have heard a lot, and there is also, if you look into international companies, there is contract disputes and receiving timely payments from. We have a lot of for example, our clients, then I don't want to disclose everything, but sometimes they have contracts with the governments, and we give them loans. They take loans, let's say $1 million loan from us to build that kind of project in Mosul, let's say, and a civil engineering company, let's say, building the roads, and they have contracts with the Iraqi government, and there is and we see the contracts, and there is there are schedules for the payments, and then they don't receive that timely payments from the Iraqi partners or the government entities that need to pay them, or the payments will be delivered after 1 year, and that really hinders the loan structure that we develop for them. So for example, when we see their financials and how they can repay back the loans, and their amortization schedule is mostly based on the payments that they will be giving, that they will be getting, the account receivable of these companies. And when these are not in line, and when they have the contract, but there is the obligation of that is not very well, or it's kind of like loose on the government side sometimes, and that hinders the payments, and then of course payment schedule for us as Grofen, as a company that give loans to these companies. And so we face these kind of issues, and we always restructure the transactions in order to accommodate for the different different scenarios that may emerge when they have this kind of this kind of obstacles that comes along the way. So these kind of impediments always, happens because you never know that, when the government will be, are they going to be are they going to obliged by the contracts and the timing of it or not? And so we have seen these kind of irregularities, and it has been well documented. And so in Iraq, this is quite common actually with some companies, and unfortunately it has to be fixed, because otherwise it will have, different effects on the business. And definitely some businesses, when they don't have account receivables, or so high that their and their debt is so high, it will be, they will have cash flow problems. And when they have that, it's just it's a free fall for down the road, and these businesses don't want to be in that situation. So lack of access to financing, just remains the common one in Iraq. We have almost every day we have access to finance, conferences, and we talk about that a lot. I have been in these conferences, but it still remains the common complaints for local and foreign companies, because we have, financial institution, let's say, growth, but we cannot do financing for every company. We have limited, capacity, but the companies or the businesses in Iraq, the SMEs the bulk of SMEs are a lot, and they almost always need some kind of financing in order to jump into the next steps. So these are the obstacles actually. And these are just, I would say drop in the ocean, because if you look into the investment and you look into every companies and the struggles they go through, I think it's quite a lot. I haven't mentioned it. We cannot mention everything here, but there are definitely more investment challenges in Iraq than these kind of slides. So, but these are the common ones. These are the ones that we have, been hearing a lot. In terms of, I think, what could it be done, I think, we have to understand ultimately the political landscape, right? Investors have to thoroughly research, key stakeholders, power dynamics and things like that in the region. And I think they do actually. They have a grasp of, there is which stakeholders that they should engage in with, and their but this is also comes to the concept of options. If they have an option, for example, if a VC have an option to invest in a company in, let's say, in Dubai or another place, they would in a stable region, they would do that actually more than they would do in an unstable region. So and it all comes down to the fixing the political landscape by ourselves, by the stakeholders. So that's one point. Diversification of the investments is something that I think is fundamental. You cannot have too much investment in one sector, too much investment in just so you have to have across different sectors and asset classes to mitigate all the risks and have quite a balanced way of making investment in Iraq, and really, because you don't know that the sectors that there are some sectors that are prone to fluctuations, for example, infrastructure, energy, and there are sectors that are less, vulnerable. The telecommunication companies are less vulnerable actually to, to fluctuations. Political fluctuation will not change their attitude or their way of running the companies. And sometimes these sectors are quite necessary, and the fundamental sectors are like energy, infrastructure, telecommunication. These are going to stay in the long term. Partnering with local entities, I think this is quite important, because partnership and being known in the community, being bringing different investors and talking to them, and introducing them to the companies is quite important. Always the investors have this idea of in Iraq, we go to the internet and we don't see anything. There are some companies that have made the news or the headlines getting investments, and these are the tech companies, the e-commerce ones that have raised some investment amounts and rounds. But a lot of companies, a lot of SMEs, they are looking for investments, but we don't see them because they are quite traditional in their approach, or they are kind of not they don't have or the investors actually don't have the the cultural nuances, and they don't have these companies are have to be looked at the level of on the ground. Basically, it doesn't have to be, shouldn't be like something that you do with the computer and you find a list or sheet and then you go there and you contact them. It has to be on the ground, has to be looked at door to door sometimes. And this is what we do actually in Growfin. Sometimes we look into companies that are actually just companies that are not known. They don't use the latest technology or the marketing, yet they are very big companies, have more than 20, 30 employees, and they have been running for years. And usually these are family businesses, and they're looking for some investment. So partnership and companies that are in Iraq. Invest in stable regions. I think that some regions are more stable than others. I think we do know that. For example, in Kurdistan region, we see some stability in this company in this region that are not found in the, let's say, the southern part of Iraq, and this will make it much more. This will create essentially more investment opportunities. So conducting, the due diligence, identifying some stable areas, I think will just minimize the risks for investors. In terms of implementing risk management strategies, so this is kind of something I think we don't have credit risk system or credit monitoring system in Iraq. So in other countries there are much more companies in for example in the United States, companies that have there is credit risk agencies that can label the companies that are that are high risk or low risk, and this will help the companies. And there is a credit monitoring system, and they monitor every transaction they have, and there is credit course that they give, and this is there's a lot when they deal with these companies. In Iraq, there is no credit monitoring system. So that could be something that could be developed in the future, where companies, depending but this is also a lot of work, because you have to have the financials of all the companies. It has to be reviewed. It has to be, every loan that they are getting has to be known. And so it gets into the, some companies would not be happy to have that. So that's one thing. Regional players is very important. I think there are a lot of VCs out there, and but I don't think there are a lot of investment players, investment companies, investment firms, or investment management firms, or VCs, or companies that are facilitating the investment. For example, I know a company, CrossBoundary. They mostly work as an advisory service. They advise company. They facilitate investments for different companies. So their facilitation work makes the investment. And I think bringing these regional players is quite important in Iraq. Talking to them and making sure that the market can absorb these and can be known to these regional players. Okay. So we will go through the Iraq versus Kurdistan region investment landscape, and I have to say that and this is some of the information I have obtained from the Board of Investment actually in Iraq. So Board of Investment in Kurdistan region. So they have on their website there's close to $67 billion investment, including $12 billion foreign development investment, actually, and joint ventures. So the Board of Investment is the ones that are actually heading or spearheading every investment in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. And they oversee all the growth on different sectors, whether it's like real estate, agriculture, tourism, and other services. So today they have licensed 1,120 investment licenses with a capital of more than $67 billion. So this is quite good news for the region, and this is something that I think need to, and we will always have to kind of know the figures and where these investments have been and which companies and all that. I think the audience will always appreciate more details about all these investments and who are the foreign investors sometimes. So but that's about in the Kurdistan region, and it's bound by something that's called Law Number 4. So that Law Number 4, has been passed by the Kurdistan region region government's parliaments. Actually, I believe it was in 2000. It was 2015 actually. So law number 4, and this law has some kind of features like tax and custom duty exemptions, equal treatment of local and foreign investors. So this kind of equal treatment and land allocation privileges, unrestricted profits and capital repatriation, 100% foreign ownership, something that's not really in Iraq. There is no 100% foreign ownership of a company. So all these things, and access to international arbitrations to resolve disputes. These are some advantages, for the investment law in Iraq, in the Kurdistan region, and it makes the much more foreign development investment ready actually. Just by looking at the laws and the regimes that we have in in Kurdistan, whereas in Iraq, it's actually foreign development investment, foreign direct investments are bound by National Law 6, so of 2006, and there is the amended version in 2015. So that outlines that improved investment. So in terms of foreign investment, there's like the purchase of land for some and investment licenses, all that. But still, the majority of the ownership has to be by an Iraqi. So the purchase of land for commercial or residential development remains extremely difficult. That's not happening for foreigners, and there has been a lot of and this is something I think they do it quite deliberately, and we will get into that. We will see the advantage of this versus that. But it's the relative openness actually is quite to more permissive investment environment for U.S. firms and franchises. This is happening in Kurdistan. Obviously, it's much more investment friendly, and there is quite the legal framework and structure to attract these kind of investments in Kurdistan. So it's not necessarily that they are quite against foreign direct investment. It's just like they want to have controls of these businesses, and that's why they are bound to like 49% of the. That's why they have the limit of 49% ownership of any business in Iraq, and so this kind of indirect ownership of most natural resources, for example, or the extraction or process of natural resources. So Iraqi companies, there is a company called Sumo actually. Sumo is the Iraqi company that manages oil in oil production and everything, and selling the oil of Iraq, and it's nationally based company that manages every sale of oil in Iraq. So these companies, cannot be owned by an external foreigner, even if they handle the project well, because they want to have, they want to nationalize these kind of scarce resources such as oil, and so they reserve the right also to screen any foreign direct investment. In fact, there is the CBI nowadays. They have the platform where every investment that's going through Iraq, it has to go through their own platform. It's still not very well developed. This is back in, I would say, in January of this year. This kind of platform, so every foreign development investment, every investment that's happening in Iraq have to be going through that platform and have to be screened by them and have to be approved. And so that kind of, goes to the digitization and much, gaining more control of, investments happening in Iraq. And so that's not necessarily a negative, point, but sometimes, just the processes of these, hinders, the amount of, the timing that it will take is a lot. So, yeah. In terms, so KRI operates in different, as I mentioned, investment law. So this is implemented in '06. So it supports regulations, and there was an updated version of that law, I think, beginning of 2020. So again, it's much more investment friendly in terms of in terms of sectors that are defined as strategic in Iraq, in Kurdistan. These are mainly tourism, manufacturing, agriculture, whereas the Iraqi government actually, to this day, still favors state-owned enterprises and state-owned controlled banks for dealing with, for every tender on investments in the company. And this kind of discriminates against foreign and private local investors sometimes. So yeah, that's the 49% of the ownership of any business. So, but here's, as I mentioned, so January 2022, the KRI, so the industrial law, allow for 100% ownership of factories and other industrial facilities. So 100% could be allowed for a foreigner to have ownership of these companies in the Kurdistan region. So how can investors actually partner with local business? What's the way for maximizing return? We have went through some of these. I think the way is to identify shared goals. If they have, what are the investment goals that they have? Do they invest, for example, in tourist sectors? And they have to be introduced. There has to be more information could be found online, more research about these sectors and where they are and how could I identify them, so that these sectors and these places has to be known for investors. So investors would not look into something that's not ready. And that's why we always talk about investment readiness of businesses. Is this business investment ready? And most of them are not, because investment readiness is something, investors would not look into things that are quite difficult and they don't understand. They always look into things that they aligns with their goals and it's understandable, and they see the returns and they see something that could benefit them and benefit the companies. So I think that's quite important to identify shared goals, and collaborations is always something that should be fostered, and capacity building of companies. And a lot of companies to this day, they don't have the financials correctly. I mean, I am at Growth, and we are constantly looking at the balance sheets of the income statement of these companies, and everything on that sheet is wrong. There is nothing like and these are known companies, and sometimes they do it for for tax exemptions, and sometimes for they don't want to share everything on their incomes with the auditors. But this is the thing that it will create this kind of hindrance for investors when they look into the financials of these companies, and then they don't see the value that it will bring actually. So and that's something that needs to be fixed, or needs to be improved a lot. Capacity building of these SMEs especially, and startups as well. They need a lot of capacity building in terms of finance. Their financials are not to the level that then these investors will be looking into it. Like it's almost quite it's almost remarkable that sometimes these companies function and have everything in order, but their finances is not. And so we see a lot of difficulties dealing with these companies, and And just because of that, which shouldn't be a point, they will not get a loan, for example, from us as being growth from, even though the company may be viable and everything is in but the way that they have managed their financials is not the correct way. So that's something, has to be, improved on the SME level, actually, to make viable businesses, actually, because finance is ultimately what the investors also look at, and they see this as really quite important for them, for whether they do the forecasting and everything. So the local stakeholder engagement, this is something also need to be looked at. I think we have seen a lot of conferences, a lot of engagement, but still the regional players are not here. Actually, nobody have invited them. Nobody have introduced them to some companies, and nobody have done the research that's required for these sectors and these companies and these businesses to bring the different investors and tell them that this is what need to be done. So I think it works both ways. It works in the way that we have to do the work here on the ground, and we have to show what need to be invested in, and then we can showcase that to the investors and see how they approach these kind of ideas and thoughts and insights. So because foreign investors will not be coming just see empty hands. There has to be something to be looked at. So ways of funding in Iraq currently, the current ways of funding, I think, is in Iraq is not very much. I would say it's quite traditional. I mean, we have family and friend and method. This is the best thing in the beginning. We have different incubators actually for startups. So this is something I think in Growthing we manage, for example, Orange Corner Innovation Fund. It's just part of the Orange Corners incubation program. This is mainly for startups, and there is, this is an incubation, and then there is an accelerator. TechWin itself actually is one of the first and great accelerators in the region. Actually, have a bunch of startups and have quite developed a community of entrepreneurs in the region. In terms of loans, the loan options, I think the banks are not in the business of giving loans. They have quite given up of that business because of the lack of support and the lack of, for example, whether it comes to the collateral registration or the credit lending. Credit lending in Iraq, it's lending via banks is rated, I think, around 186 out of 190. So we are kind of like on the lower end of being the worst countries that are in terms of lending to SMEs by the banks. And this is something that shouldn't be this way, but the banks are really not that keen because they don't see the returns or the returns of the investments and the time the requirements is also not fulfilled. So there are some companies. So Growthing in Iraq, we do lending actually for SMEs, but our capacity to lend is also quite limited. Like we don't we structure, let's say, 3 to 4 transactions for each quarter. And so that's the maximum. We have like 4 to 6 deals, and then sometimes like 7 deals in a year. So that's just like the bulk of the economy, and the SMEs market is way more bigger than us to do. We have selection criteria and all that, and companies have to know us, and we have to know them. So we do it through our networks and that. So I think it's important for companies actually to understand that there aren't a lot of options when it comes to loans, and the negative side about it is like the loans will not be for expanding the businesses and or it's just like sometimes it's working capital or survivability or just a helping hand. Angel investing, we have the Iraqi Angel Investment Network. It's based in Baghdad. I think this is it's a great network of investors actually, but angel investing in Iraq is almost dead actually. So we don't see a lot of angel investors, in Iraq. What we see is much more than whether we see the VCs are much more active in Iraq than angel investors. So there are, I believe, some companies that some angel investments rounds have happened, but it's almost always quite private and it will not be shared in the headlines, and because the nature of angel investors and the nature of these businessmen who have money and who can invest in companies, I think it's quite problematic, and mostly it's quite not the type of investment that's well known in Iraq. Grants is there are several companies that offer grants, IOM, others. We do in growth as well via the Orange Corner Funds and other incubators as well. So that's for startups. But that's also based on selection. It's like based on eligibility criteria of these companies. So this is kind of the funding in Iraq is actually investments that are happening I think for companies and SMEs, and obviously there are different investments that are happening quite with the larger ones, and I didn't delve into these. These are happening at the government level, and sometimes some governments actually and some banks invest huge amounts of money into or some financial institutions just to lend to companies, and we know that, for example, IFC they invest in companies that are in constructions, and this range will range for more. The range will be close to $1 million ranges, and this is the equity investment that they do, and but this is the investment that is happening on the larger scales. So I think the smaller scales is the ones that you see on the screen. Is like these are the ones that are quite for SMEs and startups. But then you have the VC investments that have happened in Iraq, and I think the number quite adds at around $19 million around we have since the beginning of 2020. Around I believe we have 19 deals, and $29 million. So it's not very much actually, but that's how many companies we have in Iraq that are investment ready. How much? So it depends on that as well. So this is VC backed investments that have happened, and apart from that, of course, there is the government ones and the contracts that are happening, investments in different sectors. These are the larger ones. So yeah, I think thank you all for joining this session, and we'll open it to Q&A. If you guys have any questions, we'll be ready to answer them. And more than welcome.
Thank you, Hakim. Thank you very much for this insightful session. We do have a couple of questions. One of the questions says, what micro investment opportunities are there for people with limited capital, around 10 to 50,000 USD?
10 to 50,000 USD. Okay, so there is a company based in Baghdad. It's called the Iraqi Company for Financing SMEs. I think they do micro financing. So this is one of the companies that they. I mean, depends on the way that you look at it. I think we don't have too many microfinancers in Iraq, but this is one company. I know IOM actually they had another project where they were doing microfinancing for these kind of businesses. In Grofen, we don't do microfinancing, but these are the options I think available. IFC, that's Iraqi Company for Financing SMEs. I think this is one company that can help with microfinancing.
Great.
I think UNDP actually. I know somebody from there as well. They had a project of microfinancing, but it was quite It was under development, so basically they did not roll it up, and they were looking to do it with some partners. Actually, I don't know where it went actually, or it's active now. But definitely these are the options that need to be looked at.
Thank you. The next question is Kak Hemen. So it's from Yad Shwan. He says, Kak Hemen, what is your take on investment in AI industry, which is an emerging industry around the world in our region? Very good question.
Thank you. I think it would be undeniable that AI will be taking over. This is an industry that I hear every day from architects, from people who are writers, from it's taking from photographers, a lot of things that are used to be, you used to have, the skills and everything about it, and then it's, quite done by the AI, right? It's so it's taking over. But the AI world actually is quite dominated by, the Silicon Valley enterprises. They have dominated the technology of AI, I think, and they have and there has been a lot of investment into AI. But who owns the tech? Basically, that's the question. And if we have an AI, an AI app that can do some work in that's not been done or not been replicated, I think it would be great, and people and investors would be happy to look into that. I think it will be it's a very important industry in my view.
True, very true. So Samir Yaqub is saying, has two questions. Do you have examples of public institutions that give grants in Iraq? Then I'll go to the second question. Yeah.
Right. So public institutions, I think we just mentioned. So there are some of them that are doing for startups, basically. So Orange Corners is obviously one of them in here in Erbil. We do it through growth, and we manage the fund aspect of it. It's called Orange Corner Innovation Fund, and so that fund actually entails a combination of grant and loan. But it's 70% actually grant and 30% loan, just to check the capacity of the entrepreneurs for lending as well, so they can go through the lending process. But yeah, this is one organizations, and check out IOM as well. They used to have a grant scheme as well. So yeah.
His second question is, what is the status of research-based startups in Iraq? For example, deep tech startups and etc., and their access to funding for universities.
Yeah, I think a lot of. So I don't know what he means by research based startups. These are startups that are doing research. Is that what it is? But deep tech or access to financing through universities. I think universities are quite active nowadays. I've just heard from one of my old instructors at UKH, actually. He said that nowadays UKH is actually quite booming. We have access to a lot of not funding necessarily, but not a lot of opportunities to go outside to collaborate with different meet investors, and different projects are emerging out of universities. That I can say that it wasn't the case maybe 5-6 years ago. Back when I was a student, so that was that's one thing I think it's emerging, and so it's not necessarily funding, but it's directly through the university. But funding opportunities definitely coming up there.
To add to what Mr. Hemen says, it is not very common kind of startup or a trend in the region right now, especially deep tech startups and fundings through university. But right now, universities are slowly getting active in terms of supporting startups and doing research in regards to these topics. Another question that we have is from Abdullah Izzeddin. what are some investment opportunities for university students, and what is the minimum capital?
Yeah, I don't understand like the investment opportunities. I think students. So
So let's
basically,
say there is a student with some savings in his account, or he's working and he has a little bit of saving. What are opportunities, like very small investment opportunities?
well, don't think of investment opportunities, I would say to this student. Think of, building a business, like invest it for a business, right? Invest for building. So don't invest it for some kind of returns. The investments that you want to have, for example, as a student, is like you can make your savings into quite like a business, right? Like I don't think that the traditional like investments would work for students and then they could have returns, or like, for example, real estates. I'm talking about, minimal care. He's actually referring to minimal capital. So that's what I assume is like, buying, property or things is out of question for this guy. So maybe this is something that he can do, like, save it and invest in the ideas, actually invest in his skills and his, things that are, income prone skills are the ones that you need actually as a student. And you have to check the market. What are the skills that make an income? Because it's changing actually. A lot of students, they have, the technical expertise of, say whatever field they are, how they are, studying in, and then they don't see the jobs or the demand for that kind of skill. So you have to know what are the income high income skills in the region that makes bucks, and then you develop that.
Thank you. We do have quite a lot of questions right now, so we'll try to go through all of them very quickly. Naveen Daler is asking, my question is, what is the difference between SME investment versus startup investment in terms of ROI? As an investor, which one is more beneficial?
Yeah, I think so. There is quite a lot of differences. So SMEs are, so startups. What is startup? A startup could be, an SME cannot be a startup, right? But startup could be an SME. So this is something that we have to understand. Startups actually, startups cannot be SMEs. Why? Because startups, there is the scalability aspect of them. So they have to scale up. Whereas SMEs, they can be in the market and they can, mostly in the local market, and they can function with, with the cash flow they have and with everything. And it's very important for SMEs to have good cash flow, have returns, have something much more I would say stable businesses. Whereas startups, actually a lot of them, even at the beginning, they don't have anything. It's just the idea. Sometimes some ideas that are so good, they just, like, you see investors investing in these startups and they haven't generated any income yet, or the incomes they generated is not the ones that are haven't reached the break-even point basically. But still you see a lot of injection of money into these into these startups. So in terms of ROI, I think depends on the type of investor. Actually, some investors are only investing in SME markets. So some investors, like for example, as in Growthfin, we generally, because of the it's a market that we have expertise on, right? We have the lending, we do lending for SMEs, and this type of lending, we have the resources, the capacity to do that, and we have the systems and everything that can help us to do SME investment. It's a less, I would say, it's much more, it's quite less risky sometimes, but whereas startup investments, and it's quite risky. Most of the startups, we know that 90% to 95% sometimes fail actually. And so again, are you talking about tech startups? Are you talking about traditional startups? So There are a lot of aspects to it, but this has to be, studied thoroughly, via the investment. But definitely, it depends on the type of investor much more. And there is not like this is much more beneficial than the others. It's different investors look for different things, and they have, some investors are only tech-based and they invest only in tech companies, and they see that. And so that needs to be looked at.
I cannot agree with you more. We have a couple of more questions. So Said Agha is asking, Kak Hemen, which type of investment offers more flexible exit opportunities? And another question that he's also asking is, how much involvement is typically required from an investor in a startup compared to an SME?
Yeah, so the first question actually, so which type of investment offers more flexible exit opportunities? I think depends, so this is also on the negotiation. I mean, do you want an exit from the beginning? You have to negotiate that with the investors. So this is typically during during your talk basically with them. How much typically required for an investor in a startup compared to SMEs? I think there is always a level of engagement that's has to be gauged to the level of to the amount of investments, right? So if you invest, for example, $1 million into an SME, so that SME, I have to see the contracts, I have to see the business, I have to look into it. Like obviously the amount actually, determines and there's the appetite of the investors. Some investors that are much more riskier. Some investors, just take months with you and they don't invest. Their due diligence process is something key in any investment. So whether it's as an SME or a startups. In growth and due diligence, sometimes it takes 2 or 3, 4 months for some SMEs, and for other SMEs it will take less than that. That's because of different SMEs and different businesses have different. Some businesses are seasonal, and it depends on whether their financials is correct, whether their team is cooperative, whether they can share their contracts, their finance, their audit reports, their everything that's required from the team. So that's something that's important for every investor. And the startup investment is the same, but adding to that, it's like the terms of the startup investment is, especially sometimes if you go to equity investment and percentages, then you have whole new discussion around around percentages, around valuation of the businesses. Is that valuation is up to on the founders, agreement between the founders and investors. So yeah, I think it's there is no one line answer to that, but yeah, definitely I think both of them, I would say both require. I don't think that sometimes maybe startups more, but definitely both of them require a lot of involvement from the investor.
Thank you. So Mohammed Shakhi is asking you a question. He's saying that, Kak Hemen, don't you think investors are partially to blame for neglecting tourism? Because tourism is beyond building theme parks. It's also about opportunities like musical tours and sporting events abound with high demand, especially in Kurdistan, since there is a fine landscape.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, as I mentioned, so in the beginning of on the webinar, like don't you think that we can blame the investors? Well, let's bring them the tourism. Let's do the research to them. Let's show them, showcasing what are the opportunities. As I mentioned, investors will not come to you. You have to bring them in. So they see something, they see the opportunities. You talk to them, and then they will, do then they could be supported. There are a lot of organizations that, facilitate investment, and why is that? Because there is a lack of facilitation as well for investment. It's not only that investors are to blame for lack of or neglecting a sector or something. It's just like they don't have enough facilitation to see what's really investment ready, and sometimes just they go for other opportunities, or they don't they don't see. So it's like it has to be research based, has to be as I mentioned, facilitated for them. That's
That
I
goes
think
back to Samir's question about research
Mhm.
science. And I think
Yes.
this is where the crucial and the importance of research comes in, because unless the investors know what are the opportunities and what is the potential in such an investment, they would not come to you, as Kak Hemen says. So we have two more questions. We will quickly go through them. Rejan Fatah is asking, what challenges do local businesses and entrepreneurs face in accessing finance and investment support services in Iraq and Kurdistan?
Yeah, so he's talking about local businesses, right? You mean it's
Yes,
SMEs and
yes,
startups.
local businesses, SMEs, and entrepreneurs.
Right. I think if you talk to them, firstly, they would say access to finance is one of the biggest issues they have. They have every entrepreneurs, they have a lot of especially when whether it's like startups at the beginning or even SMEs, they have they have huge potential. They talk about the potential of their businesses and how much it will create an impact, or how much it will be good for them to have that. But there is no financing for financing aspect of financing in Iraq is only coming to a small percentage of of businesses, or whether it's SMEs or startups. So this is one thing. Sometimes investors don't see the value that these kind of ideas will bring about, or they don't see the potential, the long-term potential. Maybe there is near-term potential, but they don't see, or the reverse. So it's totally the access to finance is something that very common for a lot of entrepreneurs and SME owners. The next thing is actually the company registration. I think to this day people talk about just the process and all that. It's not to the level that everybody wants it to be, and the way of dealing with the government and all that. So that's something also, but has improved a lot over the years, but it's still not. I think we had the discussion around and this is like an entrepreneurs, when they hire employees, and then their employees has to be on their payroll, and this is like if their cash flow is not matching up, and so how can they terminate that employee, or like this is I was in one of these discussions, and it's from the employee perspective is always they have to have their own their rights and advantages, and from the business owners they want to have they want to have basically control over everything. So I think this kind of like this kind of and then the government will come in and say, okay, this is the employment a rule here, and you have to kind of like give them, for example, 3-4 months salary in advance and all that. So it's like before you say to them that you are not making, the business is not making the cash flow, and therefore that employee has to be laid off. So I think there is always kind of like an active balance between employees, and because entrepreneurs, they have the different perspective of things, and not all the time is always the right one, but definitely there is things that they say regarding access to finances, especially is the biggest one.
So we will close this webinar with a question from Kazia. And this is what's probably it's going to be a tricky question.
Okay.
She's saying, considering today's political challenges and tension in the region, what do you consider as a good investment right now?
Good investment for her, good investment for who? Who is
for her as an individual, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think she has to be boggled down to politics. really a lot of business owners that I know is like considering, why you think about the tensions? Just don't do what you are passionate about. A lot of business owners, and especially in the startup community, and I assume if she's that kind of age, and developing her own business, her own startup, her own project, basically, what are you passionate about, and what kind of strength you have? So you have to look into your strength aspect is not something that you always want it, right? It's like, but you're really not good at sometimes. So and then somehow monetize that and make it, as I always say, that in the startup world there is, it's always before product market fit and after product market fit. So before product market fit means that you have the idea, but all your ideas will be absorbed by the markets, and they will pay for you for your services. So everything that you have to do is like you have to get rid of politics, tensions and all that, because that's not your you have a startup, you have your own project, and I assume it's not about politics, so you should not be thinking about that. So you have to do everything in your capacity to get into product market fit. Product market fit meaning that your ideas will be received by the market, and once it's that, then everything from there will be easy. After product market fit, that will be a startup will be viable, actually, even if it's in the short term. Maybe the market will give you painful lessons later. They will say, okay, this season the economy is not good, and so your cash flow will suffer, but at least get into product market fit.
Thank you very much, Kak Hemen. We just concluded our session with your great questions, and thank you, Kak Hemen, for this very insightful, informative session around investment landscape in Iraq. We appreciate the time that you've given us and the knowledge that you shared with us today. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for your questions and for your interactiveness during this session. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, Kak Hemen, again for being
Thank you, Deshna,
here,
for having me. Yeah,
for dedicating your time and actually creating this session for us and providing it. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Thank you, Deshna, for the great facilitation hosting this webinar. And I think Takween, as I mentioned them a couple of times, so with the entrepreneurs, is one of the leading accelerators here, and I think they developed a community that's quite vibrant, actually, I would say, and it's all your efforts and the team as well. So thank you. I'm really appreciative of that, and yeah, it was a great insightful discussion with the audience as well, like answering their questions. All the
Thank you,
best.
Kak Hemen. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful